Are you guys ready to see some really wild stuff? Like, are you ready to see Tucker Carlson be wildly anti-Semitic in maybe the least predictable way possible? Oh, sorry for touching the microphone there. But here we go, folks.
Daily discussing what happens then. It's just like it's.
Also, can we all agree that like Tucker Carlson's fake laugh is what's the opposite of endearing? Like repulsive? Yeah, repulsive.
Insane. Trust me, that's like a secular, rational position on it. You don't have to be a Christian or religious in any sense to acknowledge that that's just true. No one ever talks about that. And so I just want to approach this election with that perspective. And that event, that attack on me has helped me to do that. So again, I'm really grateful for it. I wouldn't change it if I could.
You said something. We'll go back to about the.
Oh yeah, Steve Bannon got released from prison, so that's not great. But his show's back now.
Dropping of the atomic bomb and the beginning of secular society. My dad and the greatest generation fought on the battlefields of that conflict and were one of the driving forces with obviously the Russian people and the Chinese people to deliver us from that time from Imperial Japan and fascist rule in Europe. But at the same time, Oppenheimer, and this is what's so chilling when you say about secular, he used, I think it was the Hindu god Vishnu. They called the project the Trinity Project, right? And at the very test there in New Mexico, he quoted what the god Vishnu about now. I'm the destroyer of worlds, right? Don't you find that chilling, or is that tied to your? Since that time, it's been we've now dropped the spiritual, which even Oppenheimer realized in The Greatest Generation. We kind of went to what is a totally materialistic secular society that leads America to this place in 2024. And the
guys, in case you're not really picking up what's being laid out here by Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon, both incredibly evil conservative figures, they are saying that Oppenheimer, a Jewish man, used demonic forces to create nuclear weapons. Essentially, they're trying to say that the Jews made nukes using demon magic. If I were to boil down what they're talking about. They're like, it might not, it all sounds like nonsense, but I want to parse that for you up front here so that you guys are aware what they're doing in this clip.
The instrument of its turnaround or its rejuvenation is a guy like Donald Trump?
Well, we didn't drop the spiritual. We just embraced, another element of it. I mean, if you're quoting a pagan god as you're incinerating civilians with a nuclear weapon, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that was the pivot point in America's history. And it's just so interesting how resistant a lot of people who I consider friends, I agree with on most things, are to acknowledging that. That call you pro-Hitler, you're a Holocaust denier if you question the nuclear weapons or whatever. I don't care. Of course, I'm none of those things. It goes without saying.
I mean, you're basically trafficking in the nukes aren't real conspiracy, which I've covered on my channel before multiple times. You can find those videos on my YouTube page. But essentially, the nukes aren't real conspiracy almost always ties back into like Holocaust denial, almost always ties back into anti-Semitism. In this case, it directly ties into the anti-Semitic beliefs they try and push. Are they both drunk off their gourd? No, neither of them are drunk off their gourd. This is deliberate. This is deliberate. This is like what a lot of flat earthers do too. It's like how you dig down deep enough into flat earth mythology and you wind up discovering that it's all predicated on believing that Jews are like controlling all the world's government agencies to like hide a secret, And we don't have time to go into the no nukes conspiracy, Winby, but like again, I have videos on my channel. I have multiple of them. Usually Owen Benjamin, a neo-Nazi, is the one who's pushing them. But I'm not surprised that Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson are now engaging in the same stuff. Am I absolutely sure Kamala's going to win tomorrow? You know what? If you stick around until after we finish this segment, it's not going to be that long. I'll answer your question, because yes.
Or it should. No, I'm just noting the obvious, which is that American society changed profoundly in August of 1945, and it's reflected in the culture, it's reflected in the architecture, the art, the design, the literature. Nothing was the same after the end of the Second World War. Again, it's not a pro-Nazi statement. I couldn't be more anti-Nazi. Obviously, I'm an American.
Yeah, no Americans would ever be neo-Nazis, right? Just don't look into that whole Charlottesville thing.
I care about this country and what happened to it after.
Also, just don't look into, Charles Lindbergh or Henry Ford or the Dearborn Independent, one of the second most widely circulated newspapers in the United States prior to World War II.
1945.
Don't look into the American Bund. Don't look into any of those things.
It's a very clear demarcation line, and it seems obvious to me that nuclear weapons.
Hell, never watch the movie Blues Brothers. You'll learn a thing or two about American Nazis.
Weapons are demonic. There's no upside to them at all, and that anyone who claims otherwise is either ignorant or doing the bidding of the forces that created nuclear technology in the first place, which are not human forces, obviously. And let me just ask you this, which I've asked.
I love how he just offhandedly is like, yeah, nuclear technology isn't human forces. That's demons, and then like moves past it like it's the most normal thing in the world to say.
A million people at dinner parties, but never in public. What was the moment we can point to that nuclear technology was invented? We can point to Isaac Newton and say, "What apple fell on his head?" Or we can,
You know that an apple didn't literally fall on his head. Like that's just like kind of mythology that grew up over time. Like he was a very smart physicist. That's how he came up with it.
We can point to Albert Hoffman in his lab messing around with the, ergot bacteria. That's when LSD was made. I've never met a person who can isolate the moment where nuclear technology became known to man.
I mean, I would hazard a guess that it was probably in a lab where they did the math and they realized they could split an atom and like mathematically this would be the expected result, and then they built the machine to do that. And then it made a gigantic kaboom. The kaboom moment would probably be the big one, that would probably be the big moment right there, the first gigantic mushroom cloud.
And so where did it come from exactly? Oh, German scientists in the 30s. Really, when? Name the date. And I've never.
Does he know who Marie Curie was? Shh. She was playing with demons. That she was just infected with demon cancer, not radiation cancer.
I've never heard anybody do that. It's very clear to me that these are.
Yeah, Newton drank mercury, guys. I think he didn't quite have a full grasp on all of science.
These are demonic. I mean, these are evil. Their only purpose is to destroy the innocent, to murder the innocent. They've only been used once, and I think there's an interesting ethical debate about their use. Was Truman right or whatever? But if you take 3 steps back, you could say, well, wait a second. If you end up,
well, guys, keep in mind, Tucker Carlson isn't like a dumb guy. He just plays a dumb guy on TV. It's feigned ignorance. It is an affected thing. This all started, by the way, like a week ago. He started saying like he got attacked physically by a spiritual entity that he called a demon. Now he's talking about how nuclear weapons were invented by demons and Jews, and like what he's doing is he's cultivating Christian nationalism. He's going for like the evangelical Christian nationalist, like cultist that may or may not be, scattered to the winds after Donald Trump loses. That my assessment of this is that Tucker Carlson is very cynically positioning himself to attract a lot of Trump diaspora after the collapse of the cult of Trumpism when Trump loses this election. I think that a lot of these high-ranking Republican figures have connections with one another, and they hear the stories, and I think that Tucker Carlson here is reading the wind and trying to position himself as best he can to maintain or even grow his prominence after Donald Trump falls. And I do think that he is, in the long term, eyeing a potential run for the presidency after he kind of secures this easily manipulated group of, diehard Trump people. That's my assessment. Again, could be wrong. That's how I read this.
Killing, incinerating tens of thousands of civilians, that's just a bad thing. Let's just be honest. That's just a bad thing. And anyone who does that is going to pay consequences. It's just true. And by the way, the fact the second bomb was dropped on the Christian population of Japan, which was majority in Nagasaki, in fact, it was sighted in on a church in Nagasaki. Was that an accident? Why Nagasaki exactly? And by the way, why has every subsequent American...
There are so many history textbooks about this particular event and decision-making process that he knows that there are answers out there. He's feigning ignorance to court a demographic of incurious people who are just going to readily believe what he says.
War resulted in disproportionately the deaths of Christians. That would include Vietnam, by the way, where the Catholic population was decimated, up to and including Iraq and Syria, now in Russia. Why is it that our use of force consistently since the end of the Second World War has been against Christians? That's been the effect, to kill Christians. The bombing of the Balkans in the 90s under NATO. Why is that? And I just don't think it's an accident. Clearly, it's not an accident. And I'm very distressed by it. And it's not anti-American. My family's been here since the freaking founding of the country. I'm not going to stand and take that. I'm not hardly anti-American. I'm the most pro-American person I know. I love America. And I sure hardly have to say that. It's not anti-American. I'm distressed about what's being done to my country. I feel an ownership stake in this country. I was born here. I'm a citizen. In my name and with my money. Why wouldn't I? In a much more profound and emotional way than I do when I say, look at the CCP's treatment of the Uyghurs, which is clearly bad. Would never defend it, but I don't feel as emotional about it because it's not my country. It's not being done in my name with my money. And so everything went wrong then. And there are bad things in America before 1945, but the descent has been precipitous. And you could hardly say that this country won that war. In what meaningful sense? Why don't you go to Kyoto or Tokyo and then come back to New York and LA and tell me in what sense we won? These are very obvious observations. I just picked them up from traveling. I didn't read them in a book. I've just noticed.
Yeah, notice how this is... He knows what he's doing, guys. He's just anti-intellectual. He's positioning himself as a, fascist light alternative to Donald Trump that may be more palatable to evangelicals who have been disaffected by Trump's loss or his rhetoric.
And why is that controversial to say?
It's not worth even correcting his statements because he's deliberately obfuscating things that are easily answered with a 2-second Google search.
Say it. Why does the entire staff of the Daily Wire call me a Nazi for saying that? I don't really get it. What is that? What are you defending and why?
Again, what he's doing here is just... It's anti-Semitism, guys. He's alleging that there is a conspiracy to cover up the true forces behind nuclear weapons, and that conspiracy is perpetrated by the Jews. That's it. That they control the media, so they're covering it up. That's what he's saying. But when you parse it all out, I'm acting as your translator of fascist Republican verbiage. That is what he's communicating to his audience.
What are you defending and why? And let me just say with humility, you shouldn't be defending the killing of innocents. You really shouldn't. And if you are, you ought to ask yourself why you are.
And he's also alleging that Jewish people with nuclear weapons were deliberately targeting Christians because he wants to perpetrate, again, this idea of holy war between Jewish people and Christians.
Tucker, absolutely amazing. How do people get...
Steve Bannon is such a deeply unserious person in front of the camera. Just like, he listens to all of that and just like, wow, simply amazing.
The show is the best it's ever been. How do people get to your show on Twitter, and how do they get to the rest of your content, your new network?
Just via my name, my now widely discredited name, which is Tucker Carlson. You can go to tuckercarlson.com, or I think it's Tucker Carlson on X or whatever.
Both of their laughs are so canned and fake. It's disgusting. Anyway, beware of anyone who tells you that these days that they still watch Tucker Carlson, because they're telling you who they are, and they're bad people. They're bad people that you shouldn't trust your kids around. You shouldn't trust even adults around them. Just avoid them, shun them. Okay, this is grounds for an old school Amish shunning. All right, I'm just telling it like it is. All right.